We've been doing it wrong for 35 years. Battletech has been around for a long time, and despite that time, there are still things to be found and discovered. Literary allusions, writer intentions, original plans. In some ways, it may be comparable to grand works such as Lord of the Rings or the still incomplete A Song of Ice and Fire. It takes just one letter found in a dusty collection or one resolved plot point to change so much. That may be a bit of self-aggrandizement, but with Battletech being such an established IP and so many words written, there are still things to discover. And in this case, while minimal, I still think I found something important. After pinning up a quick draw in the colors of the Fox Patrol for the Unicorn Company podcast fundraiser, I was hanging out with Dan. We were flipping through old TROs and chatting about miniatures. When I came to the quick draw entry, something stood out to me that I had missed for the decades since having owned TRO 3025. I turned to Dan and said, "God damn it, I think the whole front of the cockpit is supposed to be glass." I could not let this stand. I had to find out for sure. I asked Bishop Steiner, Battletech artist and fellow metalhead and crazy cat guy, if he could reach out to Duane Loose, who was the original artist for TRO 3025 and 3026. Within 10 minutes, the response came. Loose originally intended the quick draw to avoid having a face. It was supposed to be glass with black metal framework allowing a wide 180-degree view. When the miniature was sculpted by Julie Guthrie and debuted in the 1988 Ralph Partha catalog, she interpreted the center of the cockpit glass as a pillar splitting the cockpit in two. Interestingly, she also placed the right torso medium lasers in a forward position rather than to the rear. This may have been due to poor information provided by Fawcett to Ralph Partha, or a mistake on her part. After all, the right torso is essentially invisible in the 3025 artwork, and I can't say whether orthogonal views were provided to her for sculpting. The industry was likely much different in the heady days of the 80s than they are now. When Joel Bisk did the artwork in TRO 3050, the miniature was heavily referenced. Thus, the interpretation by everyone became essentially that the quick draw cockpit had the big pillar in the middle. The uninterrupted glass view was now gone, and the mech gained its nose. And so it turns out we've been doing it wrong for 35 years. I repainted the miniature to give it a glass front entirely. One of the remaining questions is whether the bottom rings should also be glass. They likely are, as Luce also wanted to avoid a mouth. In the end, discussions with Bishop seemed to point to leaving it as a neck rotation rings for the head. And considering the alterations by Guthrie in her interpretation, this felt like the best option. Although, if I paint another quick draw, I may make even the lower rings glass as well. In the end, does any of this matter? Maybe not. After all, as Battletech is almost done at finally updating the many designs of the mechs, and with a new quick draw on the horizon for the Mercenaries Kickstarter, who will be actively looking for the older sculpts? And yet, maybe yes. The community perspective on the older miniatures is likely tempered by the duration that they have been available without alternative. However, I cannot help but wonder if, much like the Oldhammer community, there might be a growing group of players who share my fondness for what came before. That, with time, there may be individuals looking to collect the vintage sculpts and to try and experience what Battletech was like in the early days, to tap into that vein. So where there is a community of Warhammer 40k players collecting vintage 2nd edition figures and rediscovering what was brilliant about them, there may be a community of Battletech players doing something similar. And maybe that's why this matters. That we were doing something wrong for 35 years, and now we can fix it.